Hello all! Today I'll be doing my adaptive warping in real time and talking a bit about how this method works and how I've developed it. I hope you enjoy. My name is Took. I'm a disabled genderqueer weaver who's had life take odd turns, but who knows that even tattered and worn yarn still has value, and that tired joints and health flares don't have to stop the journey. I weave exclusively with secondhand fibers, aided with adaptive warping, HR and OSHA cats, and a wonderful found family. Welcome to Hawksong Weaving, where all our paths are a little bit warped. First, of course, I have to remove Penelope Calico when she jumps up. I was having a dysautonomia flare that day, as you can probably tell by the fact that I'm wearing one of my partner's tank tops. I was overheating, and that's honestly part of why I've developed this adaptive warping method. I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which has cascaded into postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So for time's sake, know that I have joints that don't work, and if I shift positions too quickly, I get pre-syncope or pre-fainting symptoms. All of this comes with chronic pain, so for a lot of reasons, a traditional warping board doesn't make sense for me, along with being really expensive and taking up a lot of space in my small studio. So I used an accordion coat rack as my warping board. It's nice and neat, it contracts into a smaller space, and I can adjust it as I need to. And I don't need to be up and down and all around and having tachycardia, a racing heart, that stresses out my medical alert cat Penelope Calico. She's not actually trained, she's just got that tortitude and has opinions about my heart rate that she is happy to scream at me whenever I'm doing something that she views that I'm not supposed to. The really annoying thing is that she's nearly always right and has accurately let me know multiple times when I need to go to the emergency room. It's like having a border collie and a husky in the body of a cat. Sigh. So this particular accordion coat rack I got off of Amazon for about $9. It's pine, it's super light, but it's strong enough that I'm able to, bash it about. I did have to super glue the pegs down because they kept unscrewing, but that was more a quality of the screws than a quality of the pegs issue. Depending on whether I'm working on a scarf or a just weaving blank for sewing, I will warp on different pegs and different patterns along the pegs, and this is something that I've worked on over time. There's absolutely, you can absolutely take a tailor's measuring cord, measuring tape, and figure out exactly how long your warp is going to be. But because everything I work on is unique because I work with thrift store yarn, that's not something I concern myself with too much. But if you're wanting to be more precise for a specific project, absolutely utilize a soft measuring tape, measure out how long your yarn is, whatever works best for you. A warping tip for when you're working with thrift store yarn: I really recommend that you ball your yarn ahead of time, even if if it looks good on the outside. If it's thrift store yarn, you don't know where any weak points may be, you don't know if there's any moth damage, you don't know if there's any knots. Being midway through a warp and discovering knots is a pain in the butt. So making sure that your warp threads are clear, there aren't any weak points, there's no knots. It just makes things easier in the long run, and also it rolls about in a bowl a lot more easily. I use a heavy ceramic bowl that I got from a thrift store. It's sunshine yellow. I adore it. It's one of my primary tools that didn't come with anything from the weaving kit itself, from the loom kit, or just check your yarn before you weave. Another tip for warp threads in particular is to make sure it's multiple ply. Don't try to weave with 1 or even 2 ply yarn. It's just not strong enough most of the time in order to actually maintain a warp, especially if you prefer to weave at fairly high tension. Also, when weaving a warp, make sure that you're using similar tension, similar types of wool yarn over time. You'll note that I'm switching out the balls right here, and that is because I ran out of the light gray. So switching to a darker gray, finding where I tucked it in the ball, tying it off, and getting this going. I love contrasting colors in a warp. It's just more creative. Penelope, I am fine, darling. I am just voicing my audio. I pinky promise that I am not dizzy. Oh, I am actually dizzy. All right, one sec. Pausing and taking some water. Okay, some water and some Clarolite later, and I am good to go. If you have pots, or your friend has pots, or someone you know has pots, I really genuinely recommend Clarolite. It's a sodium electrolyte supplement. It gets mailed to you. It's like 30 bucks a month for a giant bottle. It has been an absolute game changer. I am not sponsored in any way. It has just legitimately saved so much angst for me, and I can't recommend it enough for someone who has POTS. It's also vegan and certified gluten-free and certified kosher, and just, yeah, it's literally just sodium and electrolytes in a vegetarian vegan capsule, and it's so incredibly helpful. I'm doing this voiceover on a rainy day, post a lot of stress, so my body is squawking a little bit. But that's part of why I have the adaptive warping method, is it's so much easier on my body. I'm not able to do the amount of walking that a traditional warping peg that comes with the looms would require. Being able to just sit and get things done is why I'm able to do what I'm able to do with this. But I'll hush for a little bit and let you just enjoy the warping process, and I'll come back on voice audio when it's time for the next steps. With all of the warp threads that I want on for this particular project, I'm lifting up the loom to release the warping board from the loom, gathering the warp threads into one large bundle, and using the back of my neck to drape them over and keep them tidy and out of the way, while I collapse the warping board and get it tucked out of the way until I'm at a full pause point where I can get it unclamped from my desk. Work smarter, not harder. Your neck's right there. You might as well utilize it for things. Of course, moving the camera a bit closer. I use terry cloth towels to cushion the warp threads. This helps prevent the finished weaving from being tighter at the ends and looser in the middle, creating a sort of sausage profile in the weaving. The terry cloth towels do tend to compact over time, but it's usually pretty easy just to throw them in the washer, dryer, and they'll fluff right back up. I did get a question recently about whether or not silicone mats would be just as effective and prevent that compacting. I personally can't stand the touch, the feel of most silicone products, but if that's not an issue for you, feel free to give it a shot. I'd love to see and hear how it goes. Part of why I love directly warping onto the loom rather than doing a warp ahead of time and then, transferring it to the loom is it allows me to cut the warp loops at the end of winding the warp. And this is what's easiest on my body. It won't work for everyone, but that's okay. This isn't a great angle, but I'm being careful to pay attention to how the warp threads are laying on the back bar of the loom. The right-hand thread goes through the smaller hole in the rigid Heddle reed. It's not critical, and some minor mistakes aren't the end of the world, but it does make it easier to keep the tension of the warp threads even across the entire weaving. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you'd like to support my work, some free ways to do that are to like, subscribe, or follow, and share. This applies to other small artists as well. It's a great way to let the social media algorithms know that this is content worth watching. If you'd like to support me financially, there's a Buy Me a Coffee linked below, which acts as sort of a tip jar. Also, now that there's so many of you absolutely fantastic and wonderful subscribers, I've been able to link the online Hawksong Weaving shop, so feel free to check out the unique handwoven products. And it's that time of year. If you're wanting to get your loved ones a gift, feel free to order something. I'm incredibly happy to fulfill those orders, and I am in my busy season, so a lot of things are going to be flying off the shelves, metaphorically speaking, very quickly. The next bit is absolutely a joke, but in this economy I won't say no. For $1,000 a month you can tell me that I'm not actually disabled, I'm just lazy, and to try whatever yoga, juice cleanse, snake oil nonsense fixed to your cousin. Feel free to message me and I'll get you my payment details. I take Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal for this nonsense. Now that everything is fully warped through the rigid heddle, I loosen things a little bit more, get things where I need them, and get the bottom apron bar up and ready to go. I take hunks of the yarn, about 4 to 5 across, and attach that over the apron bar, then tighten things up a little bit, split those in two behind, do a tie up in the front, and there we go. I've seen a lot of other weavers do this starting from right to left or left to right. I prefer to start in the middle because that keeps the apron bar in place and you don't have to argue with it and jiggle it into place a lot more often and a lot more frequently. If you have hypermobile fingers, be sure to brace them properly. Otherwise, you can end up dislocating your thumb tips or, bending your fingers backwards in a way that is most unpleasant. If you need to get finger braces for this process, I strongly encourage you to utilize those. No one likes having sore fingers because you've bent them backwards too many times. To those of you who don't have hypermobile fingers and are going, oh my god, why? Yeah, imagine how we feel. When I was getting my hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome diagnosed, my doctor told me to lock my knees, and I did so, and they went, stop it! Because it looks wrong. Because it is wrong. Joints aren't meant to bend that way. Now that everything is attached to the apron bar, getting things fairly tightened, and the other terry cloth towel tucked in, and yeah, this is how I do my adaptive warping, and I get a full warp on and get my loom entirely dressed in less than half an hour. I hope that some parts of this will be helpful to you, and if not, I hope you had an enjoying, relaxing time just watching it. Yeah, tightening things up a little bit more as I prefer a very high tension warp, but that's a personal preference. I hope that you have a really good day. I'm so glad for the odd turn that your path took that brought you here. Thank you for spending time with me at Hawksong Weaving, where we're all a bit warped, and I hope that you have a truly excellent week.